Maddie was 12 and we went to church and I saw that and I melted in the seat. It's a very weird thing.
Yep,
it's a
in front of the
trial
whole deacon board. Yeah, everyone. Say what you did wrong. Why wouldn't you do it again? Things like that. And I think I was like 9 when she got pregnant. So never talked about it at all.
And where was she didn't get pregnant by herself.
Right? Yep. And so it was interesting when I got older. So I had a pastor in the church that was very much an extremist. And my dad is he is faith-based. He is not a religion person. So he is the head deacon. So he will do things according to the church that he has to do, but he won't agree with things, and he'll be the person to speak up and say, like, we shouldn't be doing this, we shouldn't be doing that, but he still, at the end of the day, like, the pastor is the one who does XYZ. So we got a different pastor when I was a freshman in high school, and she was a little bit more open about talking about sex. And she would make comments like, she'd joke randomly about, well, remember, sweetie, when you're on your honeymoon and you have sex the first time, you have to make sure you go pee so you don't get a yeast infection. And I remember sitting there and I was like, you can't say those things to me. Like, we don't talk about sex.
Like, you felt the internal shame from it.
I was like, this is weird. But I still never had the conversation of what sex was at all. So, you find it out 100% for yourself. And to this day, it's interesting. I'm very open with everyone except for my parents. I'm not even sure how the conversation would go if I got pregnant outside of marriage in my 30s.
Wow. You know what's sad about what she said, though? And you even kind of brought it up, too, like, you backed away when, like, when you had a moment, is like, where is the good in what we have done as women, like, educationally, with our careers, who we are as people? Are we good people? Mm-hmm. And I'll speak for the 2 moms in the room. Inherently, at the end of the day, once you survive your teenage children and 20s children, because it's like Hunger Games. But you can't say I'm wrong. You can't do it. She's not going to argue. She's looking away because she's afraid they're going to listen. And I'm okay if mine does. I'll say it out loud. This is what I'll say. Did we raise good people?
Absolutely.
Okay. If there's a homeless person, would you feed them?
Yeah.
Okay.
But
whether
I don't
you had sex before marriage inherently does not make you a bad or good person. Yeah. Do you have the character? Do you have the character of a good person? Have you led a good life? And truthfully, that to me is where we go wrong with some of this, right? And so to me, like, look at the beauty of these 2 women here in the room, and you hate that they feel that way because look at all the good they do.
Well, I want to speak to that. Not only are the kids I raised good people and my character's good, but I don't even believe the behavior of having sex before marriage is a bad thing. Do I dare say that out loud?
Preach it, preach.
I'm telling you. See, I'm still pure. I am still, I've mentioned it before, the Dolly Parton saying, I was told to keep your legs crossed instead of your fingers. If you don't want to get pregnant, you keep those legs crossed. Well, that's that basic underlying, of course she's Southern bred, but that's that basic underlying idea that there is a double standard and it's not okay for us to discriminate and choose. I don't have to have a wedding band on. In fact, I may never have a wedding band on again. Does that mean I shouldn't have sex again? I hope not. So yes, I just went there. So now, if I can switch it, maybe not switch it, but guide it a little bit, we are living in the Middle East. Are we still in the middle of purity culture? What do you think?
I have a little bit of a I don't really have much of an opinion on this solely because I've been here during COVID. So there's not really, like, where we live is I don't know that where we live is part of the island because it's very progressive out here. And different than the other parts of the island compared to...
In some ways, very progressive.
I think like this little section right here of where we live is so much different than where we work.
Yeah.
I think there's a facade of it being a pure culture in some ways. Because you go out when it's not COVID, which one day you will experience, And you see the prostitutes out and the guys that come over for the weekend hooking up with them and then all this other stuff. But then when it's not club time, going out time, everybody's, well, this is what you're supposed to do. It's kind of like in the States where you put on your Sunday best, you go to church, you put on that facade for those few hours at church. And then you go home and you do whatever you're going to do.
Well, you can ask for forgiveness, honey. You know that. Jesus, take it. Come on now.
It's like you ask for the forgiveness, you go back to whatever you're doing during the week. But I think it's the same here. Like you have that. It's the same with Christianity almost. You have that facade of we're going to be pure, but mostly it goes back to it's more shaming for the females.
That's what I was just going to say, is it's more acceptable for the men to go out and be with the prostitutes and come home and ask for forgiveness. But God forbid a woman went out and stepped out of her marriage or had sex before marriage in this country.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I dated a Muslim man who was Shia. So I've experienced it. And at first I thought that too. And then I realized, and I will say he's very progressive. He's also a single father. His wife did cheat on him. He did not fight for the teenage girls. The court gave them to him because she cheated. So I'll put that out there. Mm-hmm. So just so we're looking, put the flavor out, okay? He did try to stay with her, and then she continued to cheat. So now, I might know why she cheated. I'll leave that alone. That's a different segment. But anyway.
You mean being with him? You mean? Okay. Because a lot can be read into that. So I'm making sure
before I throw the little fella under the bus, absolutely the best sex I've ever had in my life. It's a 10. 10. Maybe a 15.
Middle Eastern men are very proud right now.
Well, they should be, because he represented well. So, at least in this area of the world. Anywho, here's where I'm at. I was very concerned because I am a very bold person sometimes. I'm bold in many ways. Maybe my language, maybe my blonde hair, I have big boobs, maybe I have sparkly jewelry on. I'm not going to put these away. They're here.
You're not made to blend.
I am not. And do I know my place in a room? Yes. I was taught well by my grandmother. I know how to be in a room. I know how to be appropriate. But if I'm in my home and I'm doing what I'm doing, you're just going to have to assimilate.
Mm-hmm. Assimilate.
So, I will say this. The beauty of the love that he had for women was incredible. The beauty of the love that he had for his sisters and his mother was incredible. Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. It's alluring.
It was incredible. And then when I understood, he opened up about his faith, and I would say as a lot of us do at the table, we kind of pick and choose where we're going to be at in our faith sometimes, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. And the rules, we'll say the rules. Okay. And I always used to tell him the flesh is always going to fail you. It's always going to fail. He's like, I don't know what that means. And I'm like, you can't say that this sin is greater than the other or whatever. Yeah. We're always going to sin. This is just inherently who we are. We're made of flesh, right? And he began to understand that. But the point of what I'm saying is this. I always never understood why women were separated in mosques and things. And then he said to me, well, we should not be distracted in our minds, and we should have pure thoughts. And women are so beautiful, and sometimes we can be distracted. And the way that he would describe a woman was actually it wasn't sexual. It was just amazing. And then he would say, Stephanie, the flesh would fail me in the mosque if I stood next to you. I couldn't do it. I could smell you. I would want to touch your skin. I would want to be near you. And he said, they don't sit on the top because women, just because I'll speak to kind of our listeners here, they're separated. For those who don't understand, men are usually near at the bottom, and the women are like on the top where they're separated. Mm-hmm. And he said, we don't put them on the top to separate them in bad. We do it because they should stand on our shoulders and we should support them. And then the way he described that was
way to say it.
But that is what he thought, and
he was being genuine.
He was being very genuine, and he has a 14 and 11-year-old daughters, and all the time we would go back and forth, and he would call me like, Stephanie. They play basketball. He was a professional basketball player here, and then he ended up being like a chemical engineer. So of course, what does he do? He puts them in basketball. That's what he knows, right? And I would see the pictures. I'm like, dude, for real? Like, it's too hot for all that. Like, they were covered from head to toe. And he's like, you don't think it's inappropriate? I'm like, I could see maybe like a T-shirt under the tank top, but their legs all the way covered. And then the big fight was this, to let them shave their legs. Mm-hmm. And I was straight up with him. I said, first of all, he's Persian. You're hairy. Don't do that to these babies. And they're beautiful girls. And it's hot and it's weird. And I just straight up said to him, I was like, just because they shave their legs doesn't mean they're going to have sex. And he was like, women shouldn't talk like that. And I said, I just did. And I told you. And you have sex out of marriage. And we have sex together. And you have 2 teenage daughters. And they're not asking to have sex. They're asking to shave their legs. Put this into perspective.
Well, and it makes me wonder too, because there's always more to it if there is a, like a rite of passage, because the father tends to struggle with that rite of passage with their daughters.
Oh, we had those conversations, right? We had those conversations. I will tell you, both girls were not covered. He was very liberal about those things. They did get to make their choices, all of that. But to the extent he was building a compound, he bought Leah and Terry, he's building a compound. They have their own apartment, so they can always be at home. So let's be clear on where we're at.
Which is typical. That's what they do.
It is very typical. And I will tell you, the fight to let them go to a swimming pool and wear a bathing suit was like something him and I fought about 80 ways until we got on Amazon and I bought him 2 bathing suits. And he did it.
So, in what ways do you experience purity culture here? I can tell you personally that those are good examples, hard and fast examples. Me going to the ministry to pick up very much needed deadline paperwork and being turned away because my skirt was at my knees instead of below. Because I would be a distraction, not in the mosque. When in Rome, you deal with what you have to deal with, but the purity culture that I've experienced in the last 5 years, I could go on and on and on. How about you ladies? Because it seems like it goes across age. It doesn't matter how old you are. Those standards are those standards, and even across culture, not even just Islamic.
I mean, I have a story very similar to yours with your knees not being covered. Going to the airport to pick up my cats when they flew in. It was a cargo
and you were
terminal.
Waiting so long for them.
It was 11 o'clock at night, waiting all day, and I literally get there, and he was like, "You can't go in like that. Your knees are showing." And then I went home and changed and came back and went in, and I was like, "This is what I had to cover my knees for? Like, seriously?" Mm-hmm. We are like in an airport hangar with forklifts running around.
Well, your knees clearly equal oral sex.
Right?
I mean, I'm looking at them now. They're gorgeous. I can see where we could get wrapped up in that. I'm sorry.
Or the sign at the mall.
Right?
I'm sorry.
The sign at the mall, it says, keep your knees and your shoulders covered. And I never did see that the first 2 years.
I didn't know that was at the mall.
They don't enforce it really unless
No,
it's
they don't
wrong.
enforce
I
it,
think
but
it
you
depends
get
on
the
what
stare
your mall
down.
you're at, though.
Yep.
What mall
Also
are you
true.
at? Because I do think it's where you're located. So I'll if I could just ask a question to them and see if they've had an experience really quick. Have y'all ever been to a grocery store here that's not where we live, but like at a Lulu's or something, like off our little area? See your face, go. Yeah.
Conservative area.
I just wanted to see if y'all had the same experience.
Stare downs.
The whole time,
Yeah.
like turning around to watch you come up the escalator,
And we're
following you around the store.
Not even wearing booty shorts.
They're Bermudas.
Oh, that can happen too, even if you're completely dressed conservative, because they'll come up and say, your skin is so beautiful.
Yeah.
Because just the idea of the skin, that is, there's a real, not to get off topic, but an intent to try to bleach the skin and have lighter skin. Here and other
Man,
places.
I love it.
But you know what I'm saying? Like before I lived over here, I lived in another area of the island, and I got to a point where I didn't want to go to my grocery store anymore. And I remember my first time going by myself to a grocery store that wasn't on base. I came home, I didn't even shop, I cried. Because I didn't understand why people they were so mean to me. And I didn't understand, and I realized I had on like yoga pants and my butt was covered, but I mean, you ain't gonna do anything with these. We've already seen these, right? But I mean, it was just me, whatever it was. And I got to the point where I didn't care. By the time I was like, I'm just gonna get my fruit and go. I don't care what y'all think. But it's kind of disturbing in the beginning when you don't, right?
And is this an overall experience? I mean, like from every culture? Because we've got so many cultures here.
So I think it wasn't as much of a shock for me here because I get less hate from women in this country than I did in Italy.
Oof.
Really?
Yeah. So Italian men are very expressive, and they tell you how beautiful you are and things like that. And they honestly don't care if their wife is there. And being American and tall, especially.
So the Italian men would be very verbal.
They would be very verbal, and they want to talk to you because they want to hear your accent. They want to know where you're from, and they're very friendly. And the Italian women are very standoffish. And even people I'm close to, that's like a wall they throw up, and you have to get through the wall to become their friend. So they can be some of the best people in the world, but they are not